Chimamanda, this is almost Beyoncé. Are you an Americanah?
No.
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 Not. And you're not even Beyoncé, but you are Chimamanda, and this is huge. Welcome.
Thank you. And thank you for coming. Thank you.
I thought the first thing I would ask you, because many things that are obvious to you are more strange to us. And one of the things is, if I wake up a bit tired and somebody asks me, what is the difference between an African American and an American African? I would think, did I hear right? Is it a word game? What is the difference?
The difference is, I should say that it's sort of half invented. I kind of made it up in the novel, but it reflects a real difference. Because the African American is a word I would use to describe a person of African descent whose ancestors were brought forcefully to the US as slaves. And an American African is a person of African descent whose family came more or less willingly. So at least not on a slave ship.
But this is, of course, a very important issue in your new novel.
Yes.
Yes. And I've heard you say somewhere that race is America's original sin. And I thought that was fantastic. Can you say something about that?
See, I come up with fairly good lines, and then I don't know what to do with them.
You do?
That's the problem. So, I think what I was trying to say is that race is the major organizing principle of American history, American life, really, and it's the one thing that Americans are most uncomfortable about. It's the subject that they circle around. It's the subject that they invent codes to talk about. It's the subject that I think is still very unfinished. It's a subject that many Americans prefer to think that it has to do with the past, but it's very much the present. And I think it's also the most misunderstood, the most potentially contentious social subject in America.
Actually, one should study American history as an immigrant before coming to America to understand this strange code of hidden racial problem.
Yeah, and if you don't, as I didn't, because I went to America very ignorant of all of those things, and I think it's one thing to have watched American television, as I did, as I think everybody in the world does, and to have read American books, but to arrive in the US and, for the first time to be called sister by an African-American man, my first thought was, don't call me your sister, I don't know what this is all about, And also just to learn these very subtle things. Half the time I didn't quite understand why people got upset when somebody said something about, expressions like tar baby, or when somebody made a joke about watermelon, or fried chicken.
What's up with watermelon?
Yeah, and I would think, why is this a problem? And I think also just the assumption that I was supposed to be angered because I was black. But I didn't understand why I was supposed to be angered. And so it really took going to read and learn about American history. Because when I went to the US, I just didn't know. I had read Roots and seen the film.
You thought America was the Cosby Show?
I thought black Americans lived like the Cosby Show.
Yes.
Yes.
That's kind of sweet.
It is, but when you think about it, if that's the one thing you see, because really the sort of the portrait of black American life that I had seen and that I identified with and liked was the Cosby Show. So you can imagine my surprise when I...
Even I wanted to live with the Cosbys, so I can understand why. Tonight we have Ellen Hillingsø to read us in Danish 2 extracts from your novel. And just to get in the mood, because it was just out now here, and I'm sure a lot of you have already read it, but so that, yes! And it's a wonderful novel. But now you can hear how it sounds in Danish, and we'll just take the beginning. Well, she's good at languages. So, Ellen, if you are ready, we will listen to you.
Om sommeren lugtede Princeton ikke af noget som helst. Og selvom Efemelu holdt af de mange træers grønne stilhed, de rene gader og de prægtige huse, de stilfærdigt dyre forretninger og den tyste, varige fornemmelse af fortjent ynde, var det fraværet af lugt, der tiltalte hende mest. Måske fordi de andre amerikanske byer, hun kendte godt, alle havde haft en særlig lugt. Philadelphia var præget af en duft af verdensgang. New Haven lugtede forsømt. Baltimore lugtede af salt. Brooklyn af solbagt affald. Men Princeton havde ingen lugt. Her kunne hun lide at trække vejret dybt ind. Hun holdt af at iagttage de lokale, som kørte udpræget belevent og parkerede deres nyeste modeller ved de økologiske købmandsbutikker i Nassau Street, eller ved sushi-restauranterne, eller isbutikkerne, der bød på 50 forskellige varianter, inklusiv rød peber, eller ved posthuset, hvor overstrømmende personale sprang ud for at tage imod dem ved indgangen. Hun holdt af universitetsområdet, der emmede af viden, og af de gotiske bygninger med slyngplanterne på murene, og sådan som alting i tusmørket forvandlede sig til en spøgelsessceneri. Mest af alt holdt hun af, at hun i al den afslappede overflod kunne lade som om hun var en anden. En, der havde fået en særlig invitation til at komme ind i denne hæderkronede amerikanske klub. En, der smykkede sig med vished. Men hun var ikke glad for at skulle tage til Trenton for at få flettet håret. Det var urimeligt at forvente at finde en afrikansk hårsalon i Princeton. De få sorte, som hun havde set på stedet, havde været så lyse i huden og så glatte i håret, at hun slet ikke kunne forestille sig dem med opflettet hår. Alligevel spekulerede hun en stejhed aften, hvor hun ventede på toget ved Princeton Junction Station, over hvorfor der i virkeligheden ikke var et sted, hvor hun kunne få flettet sit hår. Chokoladen i hendes håndtaske var smeltet. Et par andre mennesker stod også og ventede på perronen, hvide og magre og i kort, luftigt tøj. Manden, tættest på hende, spiste en isvaffel. Hun havde altid opfattet det som en smule uansvarligt, når voksne amerikanske mænd spiste isvafler. Særligt når de gjorde det i al offentlighed. Da toget omsider kom til knagende standsning, vendte han sig mod hende og sagde med den fortrolighed vildt fremmede udviser, når det gælder en fælles skuffelse over offentlig transport: det var på tide. Hun smilede til ham. Det grånede hår bag på hovedet var ret frem. Et komisk tiltag, der skulle skjule hans skaldede plet. Han måtte være akademiker, men ikke inden for humaniora, da han ellers ville være mere bevidst om sig selv. Han hørte til i en eksakt videnskab. Måske kemi. Før i tiden ville hun have svaret: det må man sige. Dette besynderlige udtryk for samtykke. Og så ville hun have indledt en samtale mellem dem for at se, om han sagde noget, hun ville kunne bruge på sin blog. Folk blev smirrede, når man bad dem om at tale om sig selv. Og hvis hun forholdt sig tavs, når de gjorde en pause, fortalte de mere. De var opdraget til at udfylde stilheder. Hvis de spurgte, hvad hun lavede, gav hun dem et vagt svar: jeg skriver en livsstilsblog. For hvis hun havde sagt: Jeg skriver en anonym blog, der hedder Rasende. En sort ikke-amerikaners forskellige observationer om sorte amerikanere, tidligere kendt som negere, ville gøre dem ubehageligt tilpas.
I think this is the perfect introduction to Ifemelu, the main character, who is, in a way, at the top of her American stay now, yes, because she has this very successful blog and she's going to have her hair done and so on. But in reality, she's not really happy. She feels fat and has cement in her soul. I thought that was too much to bear for one woman. What is the matter with Ifemelu?
She was going through a bad phase. You know what, I imagine that I think for me this book is a lot, it's a lot about longing for home, just longing in general, but more specifically longing for home and what home means, and I guess whether you can go home again after you've left. And for her, the cement in her soul was just a form of homesickness. Homesickness seems too easy a word to use, but a kind of longing for something more, and sometimes not being sure what it is you're longing for, but still feeling a sense of longing.
But she is feeling fairly sure about what it is that she is longing for, this going back to Nigeria, isn't it?
She's not entirely sure that she's made the right decision. She's sort of trying to pep herself up and say, yes, this was the right thing, but she has her doubts.
But she does a wonderful thing. She sees signs everywhere. She connects with people that she normally wouldn't connect with, and she takes things in that really are not her style.
Yes. Which is, I think, a consequence of her being uncertain. So she chooses to see signs in everything. If the sun rises, she thinks it means that my visit home will go well.
But she's going to the hairdressers. And this is one of the many wonderful things about your book, is that you take one of the smallest and most intimate female universes, the hairdressers, and especially perhaps the African braiding hair salon, and like a small box scenery, the whole story, like an Aladdin's lamp. She gets her hair rubbed, and out comes this amazing story. What made you think of putting her into this?
That's actually quite a lovely image. I wanted to, because a lot of it came from my own experience, which is that I have spent way too much time in African hair braiding salons over the past 15 years, and I'm fascinated by it. It's a subculture for me. I think it says a lot. It goes beyond hair. I mean, I think hair is important, but it goes beyond hair, and it says a lot about immigration, about what it means to be African outside of Africa. And I would go to these braiding salons and take notes all the time, because often the characters were hilarious. And they were mostly Francophone African women. But then you would have all these other women come in, African Americans, Anglophone African women, the rare white woman who wanted to do a Bo Derek hairstyle.
That is so old-fashioned.
Well, but she wanted to show that she was down with Africa.
Yeah.
And so she got her hair in cornrows. And I would be fascinated by it, because I would also I always sensed, maybe because I romanticized too much, but there was always for me also a kind of beautiful sadness about watching these women who were making new lives, but also were putting on and taking off different versions of themselves. And sometimes the children would come as well, sometimes to help out, sometimes to just hang around in the hair salon. And I would watch them, and just even the interplay of a certain kind of Africanness, but also a new Americanness, was always fascinating to me. So I wanted to try and capture that in the novel. I don't think that I've seen in literature the African hair braiding salon deconstructed. And I felt it was an important subject too. Yeah.
Your hair looks fantastic, I have to say.
Thank you. But this was made in a hair salon in Lagos, which is an entirely different planet. Equally interesting, but...
What's the difference? Somebody seems to know.
Yes, I think there's a Nigerian here. No, it's just that I think that African hair braiding salons in the US, I mean, clearly it's a subculture of a multicultural thing. And in Nigeria, it isn't. In Nigeria, hair salons are very interesting, but, you know, if anything, what you learn in Nigerian hair salons are the different levels of female imperial power in its different manifestations.
Wow.
And also the different levels of female-to-female unkindness. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't think this is just about Lagos, though.
Anyway, it's difficult not to talk about hair, not just because yours is put up in such a fantastic way, but it does really play a role in the novel, and there is a lot about hair that I didn't know. I mean, it's not that I don't struggle with my hair, and I did make an effort tonight, but but I will but I will tell you that the thing about wigs, for instance, I had no idea, and the thing about the burns and the whole hassle that it is, it was kind of, you laugh because, you know,
no,
how would I know?
Exactly. But I'm pleased to hear that, and I've heard that from many people, and I laugh only because really I'm happy to hear that. Because then how would you know? And I think even that says a lot about one of the I guess, points I wanted to make with this novel, which is that the hair of black women is so little understood and so little known that it's very easy to attach assumptions to it. And it's easy, for example, to say that a woman doesn't look professional because she has her hair in a certain way. But if you understand that maybe that's the way her hair grows on her head, and and she doesn't want to have to put chemicals in it to look professional. Mm-hmm. And that even the very definition of professional is something that's based on an ideal that isn't a black woman's. Right? So it's really that the world... it's really that, so when people say to me, oh, I didn't know this, I think, well, I'm pleased, because I really do believe in the importance of cross-cultural conversations. I think that it's the way to... It's the way to better understanding. It's the way... A friend of mine who read this book, and who's a dear close friend, and who's an Englishman, a white Englishman, and he said, after he read it, he said the thing that most struck him, he said, I didn't know Michelle Obama's hair doesn't grow like that.
Okay, that's kind of cute. That much I knew.
But he didn't. He didn't. So he assumed that she wakes up and her hair has that texture.
Fantastic. But there is also a part in the book that discusses Michelle Obama's hair. And it seems to be a kind of a wishful thinking, at least, that what would happen if we talk about role models, if Michelle Obama went a bit more frizzy.
You know why I wouldn't even... That's funny. I wouldn't call it going a bit more frizzy. I would call it if she stopped the straightening. Yeah. Because the frizzy, it's actually her. That's how if she stopped the straightening, it was something wishful. I mean, it wasn't at all, because I really adore Michelle Obama.
I know you do.
And And for me, she's an example of a black woman, who is very keen to she fits all the definitions of mainstream black respectability. You have to straighten your hair, and even the kids now have to straighten their hair. And I wonder, are they doing it with a relaxer or with heat? And I worry about how uncomfortable it must be for the poor kids. But I think for me, really, it was just a larger question of, if Michelle Obama had natural hair, Barack Obama would not have won. He would not have won. It's true. I mean, it's sad and it seems shallow, but it is true. Because particularly in America, there are all of these assumptions attached to natural black hair. If Michelle Obama had dreadlocks or an afro or cornrows, she might be thought to be radical, Black Panther, difficult.
Or a jazz singer.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, and that's also not
good for presidency.
No.
It's rather shocking. I mean, we can make fun of it, but it's really sad.
I think it is very sad. I think it is very sad.
So you have a black president, but we're not all there.
You can't be too black.
No.
There are ways, because when you think about it as well, I mean, even the kind of enthusiasm and joy that we had, that many people in the world had when Barack Obama became president, I think in itself was a statement about I mean, why were we so happy?
Yeah. Well, obviously, because he was the first.
Right. But I mean, I think that for me at some point, and I was one of the happy ones as well, I was in Nigeria with my friends, and we stayed up late to watch it. But you sort of being objective and stepping back, I'm thinking, why are we so happy? We're happy that he's the first, but it seemed to me that our joy sometimes clouded the larger point, which is, it's also a statement of how deeply exclusionary American society still is. That we're so excited about the black man finally being, 300 years after black people have been in America, a black man is finally the president, and we're so excited. And I'm thinking, I just wish that our joy had been tempered by a kind of reflection about what this says about race today.
The reflection came afterwards. Now they don't like him.
Yeah, but it's not even about, the reflection is more about, we wanted you to be Jesus Christ and you're not.
Yeah.
So it's...
Well, he wasn't black, was he? So how could he be?
Yeah. That is true.
Chimamanda Ngozi actually wanted to vote for Hillary Clinton. How can you explain that? That's very confusing.
Why?
Because, well, no, I wouldn't say it's confusing. I think it's typical of Ifemelo, who has many wonderful ways of escaping the cliché. Every time you think she goes with this or she goes with that, as they say, or how you say it.
I'm happy that you're learning Nigerian expressions as well.
I'm trying my best.
But it has to go a bit quicker.
Oh, that fast?
Yeah.
My gosh. I'll speed up.
And it can express, it can be surprise, it can mean many things. It's very contextual. But yeah. Ifemelu, but it's not though, because in some ways because I follow American politics, I'm very interested. And I am a deep admirer of Hillary Clinton's. And when before the Democratic primaries, I'm not an American citizen by choice, so I don't vote. But I think at the beginning, if I had been an American, if I voted, I would have been a Hillary supporter. I just admired her. I thought she was just brilliant and wonderful, and clearly, of course, I like that she was a woman.
That's okay.
Yeah, we're supposed to. It's interesting to me that when you're black or female, and if you like public figures that reflect your own identity, you're supposed to be quick to say, "Oh, it's not just because she's a woman."
Okay.
Right? But if you're a man, the assumption is, you're supposed to support men, but nobody actually thinks about, are you doing it because you're a man and he's a man? And
no, they are the norm. Let's face it.
Exactly. Which is why. So I suppose my point is, I want to be open and honest about, I deeply admired Hillary because she was a woman and because she was a woman who was worthy to be president. But then I read Barack Obama's book and I fell in love.
Yeah. This happens.
Yeah.
Actually, this happens a lot in your own book. There's a lot of literature in your literature.
Yeah.
It's also a book about literature because the whole notion of America for Ifemelo in a way comes from Obinze's obsession with all American and also with literature.
Yes. I think probably all of my writing has something to do with just celebrating books because I love books. And books mean so much to me, and books have formed much of my worldview. And I wanted Americanah, and Ifemelo is not a reader, at least not in the beginning, which is very unlike me.
Yeah.
But and so in some ways, Obinze, I'm Obinze, and Obinze is me, but I didn't have that kind of obsession with America. But I had friends who did, who knew everything about American history, had never come close to America itself, but could sort of recite to you all the presidents, that kind of thing. And I think, and then Ifemelo, I wanted this also to be a journey of somebody who goes from not being a reader to being a reader, and how it changes her life, and how reading has real and practical consequences for her. It helps her with her homesickness, it helps her with adapting to this new country, so that it wasn't just, that reading actually has sort of a utilitarian view of literature.
But I wrote it down, but I tried to see how many books and references I could find, and I'm sure I didn't find them all because it was an idea that came to me this afternoon. But at least Graham Greene plays a role with the heart of the matter, because Obinze's mother loves this book.
Yes.
And I think Ifemelo finds it morose, or is that you?
No, I'm not in the book. It's the characters.
I know.
No, Obinze finds it
a bit too morose.
Yeah, he just doesn't understand his mother's obsession with it.
No.
But his finding it that way is also partly a result of his America obsession. So that everything that's not American just immediately isn't good enough.
Yeah.
And Graham Greene is the most
British.
English you can get.
Yeah. But it's a book that plays out in Africa.
It does, and it's also a book that I think there are people who are surprised that I love that novel, and I do.
I am surprised. I love that novel, but I'm surprised that you do.
I do because I find it an honest novel, but a novel that doesn't have malice. And I think there's a difference. I think there are many novels that have been written about Africa that are deeply...
the way you say it, Africa.
that are deeply ignorant and often quite malicious. Graham Greene, I think that there's a beautiful sadness about that book that I really connect to, but also just the portrayal of these people's lives and the sense that he's very honest about the power structures of that time, of sort of colonial, I guess Sierra Leone or Liberia, we're not really sure. And I admire that. But at its heart, it's really this melancholy man and love.
Yeah, two things that you really like.
Yes.
Whereas you don't like Naples, a bend in the, what is it? A bend
in the river.
In the river, yes, of course. This is actually the white woman who comes to have her hair done. She's going to visit Africa. I don't remember where she's going. She's going to several places because she wants to really do Africa. Yeah. And she has read this amazing book, she says, and you don't mention the author, but you do the title, so it's not so subtle to find out who it is. And then Ifemelo makes a review in the book. Was that not a funny day at the office? I mean, imagine getting back at Naples in your book, and there it is, and it's not a newspaper, it doesn't go away.
No, but I think I should say, I think that the novel has its merits. I don't think it's... there's some novels I read, and I think, why did anybody publish this? But A Bend in the River is not one of them. I think it has its merits. I can understand somebody who says, I liked it. When I first read it, I didn't really, I was indifferent to it. And for me, it's important to connect emotionally with a novel. But for me, what was then very annoying was to be told by somebody, not in a hair salon, I don't really, that it was the most honest book about Africa. And I found it very annoying because really what that person was saying and what people who think that really mean is that a book about Africa that confirms all the negative stereotypes is somehow true. But it's not a literary judgment, it's a political judgment.
Yes.
And it annoyed me very much, so I thought I would throw it into the novel.
Bluff, there it went. Well, she, however, doesn't like, this white woman in the salon doesn't like Achebe, Chinua Achebe. She finds it a bit quaint.
Yeah.
And I think that may be one of your favorite novels,
yes.
Things Fall Apart.
Yes.
Because when I was reading Purple Hibiscus, your first book, it's almost the first sentence. Is that not correct?
Yeah, no, it's true.
Things were falling apart.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is literature with the literature, and this is why it can almost be difficult to make a conversation, because I have been finding thousands of sentences that but I could also just quote this and quote that, and it's really so. It's also interesting and so beautifully written. But I thought we could talk about different levels of being an immigrant in this book. Because Ifemelo comes to America and with a scholarship. Yeah. It doesn't get her all the way, and she has to make a living. Yeah. And Obinze later, who is Ifemelo's love, the love of her life, the love at first sight, because there's also a love at first laugh with another man. But Obinze is the man, and he goes to London at a certain point to make his way through, but with no scholarship and having a hard time. But they actually go through a kind of similar hard time.
Yes, but Obinze's experience is very much shaped by his being undocumented. Yes. So his visa expires, and so he has to live as a shadow of himself. He has to live as somebody else, because the only way he can walk is with somebody else's papers. And I was very curious. I mean, his story is based on a number of interviews with real people, because that's quite normal for many people. And I wonder what that does to your soul, really. I mean, people are very practical about it. I have to walk, I have to send money back home. But I've wondered about what it does to you, the things that you don't let yourself dwell on, because you have to be pragmatic. And I also wanted to, Ifemelo, it's a bit easier for her, I think, because she's documented. Even though, when she's done with her studies, she has to figure out how to get a job and stay on. But it means that her experience is not as, she doesn't live in shadow. She deals with disorientation, but at least she bears her name.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very important.
Yes.
But isn't there a certain... No, that's... Okay, Obinze at a certain point has to have a different name.
Yeah, because he walks with somebody else's papers and number, and which means that he has to bear somebody else's name, and which means he has to remind himself every day that this is my name, even though it really isn't.
And then there's Auntie Uju, who also goes to have a career in America, which is not easy.
She's a doctor, and she leaves Nigeria because a relationship ended very badly. Mm-hmm. And we won't give out the details, right?
We can. I don't know how many of you have already read it, but I suppose that we must not put in everything. Yeah.
So she goes to America
suggestions
to start over, and she's a doctor, and she has a difficult time. I wanted to write about the kind of, I think that the prevailing notion of African immigration that many people in the West have is, very much about the African single story. It's people who are refugees from war, people who have fled terrible poverty, that kind of thing. People who are expected to be deeply grateful to have been allowed into a Western country. But the immigration that I know and that the people I know is very different. It's educated people who are middle class, who often choose to leave because they want more, because they have dreams. But also about and who end up doing very well in the countries they go to. So if Emelo does well, and Tiuju, who has a hard time at the beginning adjusting, ends up being this doctor with a job and a life and an independence and all of those things. But there's still a sense of longing. Yes. There are things that one loses in addition to gaining.
Because it's also, immigration is one word for it, but another word which I think could apply to more of your novels and the characters in them is the searching of fitting in. How do you fit in different contexts? Yeah. And of course, immigration is a very sort of touchable thing, but it's also, there are several ways of being uncomfortable about who you are, where you are, why you are the way you are, and at a certain point, Ifemelu says, I think it's with one of her lovers, if I only could feel what I want to feel, that would be so much easier.
Yeah. I think that is true, the idea of fitting in, but I think even more, it's the question of how do I fit in, what does it mean, but even more, the other question of should I fit in?
Yes.
And I think for Ifemelu, the answer is, I think, that one doesn't necessarily have to. And so I like to think of this novel as that cliched thing of she finds herself in the end. So maybe I'll do a revised version that will be a self-help book, how to find your true, authentic self. Write a blog. Right? But I do think that, I'm very interested in what it means to be part of a group, but also in what it means to be different. I think if I had to have a political position, if I ran for office, my major platform would be let's create room for difference. Yeah. And I say this from a personal perspective because I'm very much like Ifemelu, sort of I'm fiercely proudly Nigerian, fiercely proudly African, fiercely proudly Igbo. I think that the very little about me that is good is a result of my having grown up in Nigeria, of my having sort of this rootedness in who I am. But at the same time, I've always felt just ever so slightly removed from things. There are things that I know I'm supposed to like that I don't like, and things that I'm supposed to believe that I don't necessarily believe. And being part of a group means that sometimes you have to pretend that you believe it, even though you don't. So in Igbo land, and I think in much of sub-Saharan Africa, the idea of children and the idea of the role of femaleness being reproduction is central. It's not something you question. Of course, you must. Children. And while I love children, especially when they don't belong to me, there isn't any room for the conversation and for the fact that there might be women who don't in fact share this kind of ideal. You can't even have the conversation. There's no room for it because you're immediately silenced. And the kind of label you might get is you're not being, it's not our culture. And I sometimes find myself wondering how many women are silent about what they're really thinking and feeling. Yeah.
Not just in this aspect, but in lots of things.
Oh, yeah. In general.
In general.
And also not just in Nigeria, by the way, I want to say. Nigeria is where my heart is, so I talk about it all the time. But everywhere in the world, I think that question of belonging. And I guess I have to say I'm particularly interested in the experience of women, because I think that idea of silencing to be part of that idea of conforming is something that's very gendered. It's mostly women all over the world who are expected to.
Can we, when you say a group, could we call it family? Because family means a lot in your book.
Yeah. Yeah, family means a lot, yes. Family means a lot to me. Family means a lot to the people I write about. And, you know, and I'm not, I think a lot of contemporary literary fiction assumes that there's certain things one has to be ironic about, such as family. Right? If you're going to write about your parents, you know, it better be dark and complicated. And my sense of family is not really like that. My family is actually quite happy. And we actually really love one another. And
there are a lot of you, so
yes,
there's a lot of love.
Yeah, there's a lot of love, there's a lot of laughter. I'm the fifth of 6 children, and my parents have been married for 50 years, and they're actually good friends. You know, they bicker very often, because you can't live with somebody for 50 years without sort of bickering all the time. But it's very charming to watch them. Even the bickering for me is an act of love. But at the same time, and so for me, family is a warm, fuzzy thing mostly. But I think it's possible to have a very positive attitude to family, but still find oneself questioning certain things, and you know, in other words, that the idea of do I belong, how do I belong, doesn't have to come with the baggage of negativity. At least it doesn't for me.
Around the family, or perhaps as you would say, a part of the family, there are always aunts, and they are always wonderful. Is that because even within a happy family, you need an aunt to get relief from the family sometimes?
No, actually, you know, for me, the family is actually, it's an extended thing.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. My definition of family is quite broad. And so my siblings, of course, my parents, but also my cousins. I have cousins who are as close to me as my siblings. And I think that as a child growing up, I had aunts who played major roles in my life simply by being present. And I've modeled, I mean, Auntie Uju not so much, but in Purple Hibiscus, I have yet another auntie character. I think that my next novel will be called The Aunties.
The Aunties, yeah.
And that character in Purple Hibiscus is modeled after an aunt of mine who, maybe it's also a way of, I mean, I'm just thinking about this now, it's not something I've thought about. Maybe it's also a way for me to write about female characters, but with a certain kind of distance. Because if I wrote about mothers and sisters, and it can be too close. Auntie is close enough, but it gives you a bit of distance to do things with the character, I think.
Okay, you have to be more careful with mom and dad.
Yes.
Now, Ify Melo in America is happy and unhappy, and through her we get a fantastic description of what America is like for a woman like her coming from Nigeria, and she sees things and she says things that are not always popular. But some of the worst things she says about race and how the Americans are, I mean, even the opening chapter here with the American eating ice cream on it, that is so mean of you, but that is so funny.
Mean?
But yes, because we all think like that sometimes, and it's not good to see it in writing. Yes, it is. What I wanted to say is that she has another way of expressing herself, which is the blog.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you invented this blog for Ify Melo to have an even sharper say on things.
Yes, yes. The blog was, I wanted to say many things about race, because I wanted this novel to also be social commentary. But I wanted to say them in ways that are different from what one is supposed to say in literary fiction. And I just knew that if I had her say them as dialogue, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't seem right. And I also wanted these things to be said in a voice that was kind of different from her real voice, because the self that is in that blog is different from the self that lives every day. And So yeah, the blog, the blog was a device which I enjoyed very much. I've never blogged, but I would write these blogs and just stop and laugh, which in some ways was also worrying because I thought, why am I so amused by my own humor? It's like, is this, you know, I started thinking,
because
is this
it is very funny.
yeah, but you know what? I would laugh then stop and think, is this normal? Right? I mean, should I be worried? But I had so much fun writing it. But also I felt that I wanted to say things that I do think are important to be said. And the blog just seemed the perfect device, the kind of the immediacy of the blog, the way that the language could be very different, and the way that it just allowed certain things to be said, I think.
Because some things are a bit, I mean, even the blog is a fiction, but of course it stands out almost like something out of non-fiction, because it's based on apparently facts. I mean, literature is really confusing because you think that you're in a novel and suddenly you are in a blog and what is what.
And you have things like where she says, you know, for all the zipped-up Negroes out there, this is your safe space.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of thing, I mean, I've never actually seen that in the blog, but I would like to. I mean, I think that many, I think the idea of the zipped-up Negro, which I found hilarious when I came up with it, but I think it says something about American life. I mean, in some ways, Barack Obama is a zipped-up Negro. The poor guy has to be.
Of course.
Yeah.
How can we unzip him? And she gets a lot of followers for this blog.
Yeah.
I mean, apparently there really is a need for a blogger of her kind.
Well, so I imagined.
Yeah,
for the novel.
I mean, you had me thinking that would be very nice. But she still, and this blog is then discussed often between the friends that she's with her different boyfriends, because in spite of Obinze being the great first love of her life and love of her life also eventually, there are other men in her life.
As there should be.
As there should be. Yes. But I understand that in Nigeria, this was not a popular issue. That's a worry with Ifemelo. Is that not right?
It wasn't about the other men in her life. It was more that many Nigerian women who read this book, and I'm very happy that Nigerians actually are reading it. It's doing very well in Nigeria. But many of the women are very upset about what they call Ifemelo being a husband snatcher and Ifemelo breaking a marriage and that kind of discourse. And what it says to me, it doesn't surprise me, right? So that Ifemelo is not necessarily popular, and that Ifemelo isn't a female character who shies away from sexuality. That she's a female character who's very, who is not reactive, who's proactive, who she's in a good relationship with a man, but she cheats on him anyway. And these are not things that we expect of women.
These are things we do not forgive easily.
Yeah, we don't forgive women.
No.
Easily, yeah, because we forgive men. I think if Ifemelo had been a man and everything was the same, Nigerian women wouldn't have a complaint. They would say, well, men will be men. And so I wanted, but that is important to me, really, the idea of a woman not being apologetic for her sexuality, the idea of just even the subject of sex itself not being something that's used to shame a woman. And I like that Ifemelo is deeply flawed, and I wanted her to be, because I think that's what it means to be human.
There's a lot of good sex in your book. I mean, actually this could be a problem because, wow, they have amazing sex in your books. It's...
Not all the time. Though.
Not all the time, yeah. Not all the time. Actually, that's one reason why Ifemelo has a funny thing, a feature, which is also something in a lot of people have in your books. It's boredom. She's quite easily bored. Look at you. Actually, she cheats on one of her boyfriends because she's bored.
Yeah. And kind of curious as well.
And yeah, that was I have put those words together. Curious, curious
right,
and boredom.
But I think people are, and people do. But but I think also that, and in the novel, when her friend says to her, "How could you have done it?" and I think she's supposed to have a reason that's very deep. She's supposed to say, "I felt abandoned by the boyfriend," but she's really just bored because he's wonderful. He's good to her. He's kind. Sometimes she finds him annoying, but fundamentally he's a very good partner. But she still destroys it. And
he's white? He's
white, yeah. But that's not why. That's not why. Actually, if anything, it's less his whiteness and more his Americanness. He's a particular kind of American that she would look at him sometimes and just think, why are you so optimistic and sunny and happy?
Yeah. He's too little melancholy for her, actually. Poor Kurt. His name is even Kurt. And he's actually a very sympathetic character, I must say. You can mock him a little, but I know you like him.
Very much. Yeah. Very much.
He is sunny side up.
Yes, and I think one of the things that I found interesting about, it's a larger it's a generalization about America, but I think it's largely true, and it's also a class thing. There's a certain kind of middle class, upper middle class American enthusiastic optimism.
Excited.
Yes. Oh my God, I'm so excited, and. It can sometimes seem like a kind of naive innocence in some ways, and it can be very charming, but also it can just be, it's easy to lose patience with it sometimes.
I can see you as the strict teacher in some context. Yeah. Don't But it's true. What do they say in America about Americanah? Are they happy for your book? I know the reviews have been raving. I'm not talking about this, but what we are doing here tonight, you've done in several places,
yes.
Roundabout in America. And do they accept this? Because it is a satire of their country, and you do come from abroad. So what do they say?
They say, "Shut up and be grateful we let you in." No, that's not true. That's actually not true. That's actually not true. What this book has taught me, I wasn't sure. I was prepared to have it be, battered by reviewers and by readers. And I wrote it because it's a book I wanted to write, and also because I still get royalty checks from half of the Yellow Sun. So I can still actually, buy diesel for my generator in Nigeria and eat and go shopping, even if nobody buys this book. So I wrote the book I wanted to write. And what has made me so happy is that I've actually been very surprised by people who have embraced it. When I do these events, I often have a big academic turnout, and this is a book that makes fun of academia in America.
Oh, yes. Even on the first page,
But there's also a kind of, it's also my American family. So it's kind of self-mockery. These are people I know, and I'm kind of like them in some ways. Right? So it's also the kind of looking in the mirror and saying, ha, 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 we're really very silly sometimes. Yeah. But many academics have said to me, thank you for writing the sort of thing that often isn't written about in serious fiction, because they're many of them are using this in their classes, because they say it starts a conversation about race. And of course, this is America, where there's certain things one is not supposed to say about race. An African-American woman at an event in Cambridge said to me, and this remains the best compliment, in my opinion, that I've received about this book. She said, thank you. You've written everything we think but we don't say. And then she said, and please know that you're never going to win any more prizes. And for me, that was such a compliment, because it's... I said to her, it's fine. I've won a few, so I'm kind of happy not to. But I think what she was saying is there's something truthful and raw and about this that might make people so uncomfortable that they will not reward you in the conventional way.
Yeah.
And I was very grateful to her for saying that. But she was wrong.
Yeah. Which makes it easy to be happy, double happy.
Yep, because it went on to... So really, I've been very grateful and very pleasantly surprised by the American...
And I think you also really do love America, because you cannot make fun of somebody that you don't also love.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I feel very grateful for America and to America. America is my rich uncle.
Yes. Yeah. You're so naughty.
Yeah, or my rich auntie. Well, no, rich uncle. Rich uncle who gives me pocket money but doesn't remember my name. Yeah. That's what America is. You know, you feel very affectionate. You feel very affectionate toward that uncle. But you're right, this book is there's a lot of affection.
There really
for America.
Is.
Yeah.
I read George Eliot's Middlemarch not so long ago, and I thought it has the same. I mean, Middlemarch is tough on its people, but there's a lot of love there too.
So I adore that novel.
Yeah. Yes. So I think we should perhaps hear from you again, Ellen, because I have another. Did you find it in the book? Because this is an extract from from the end of the book.
Did you mark it in yours?
I'm afraid I did not. I just marked the other one. But I'll try and find it while you get up. But should we say perhaps just 2 words about? Will you say 2 words about where we are? I'll say 2 words about it. This is a scene that I chose because to me it's heartbreaking and scary, and we've touched upon what it is about, because it's the result of Ephemerus being a husband snatcher, because this is Obinze leaving the wife that he has married while she was in America and actually left him. So there's nothing to be heard about, but she comes back and things happen, and he's now telling his wife the consequences. Let's hear it.
Han var træt, da han vågnede morgenen efter, og hans hoved var fuld af en stor sorg. Cosi var allerede oppe og havde taget bad, og sad nu ved sit toiletbord, som var dækket af cremer og kosmetik, så nydeligt placerede krukker, at han nogle gange havde lyst til at sætte hænderne under bordet og vælte det, bare for at se, hvad der ville ske med krukkerne og flaskerne. Det er længe siden, du har lavet æg til mig, Sæt, sagde hun, og kom over for at kysse ham, da hun så, at han var vågen. Så lavede han æg til hende og legede med Bouchy i et stue nedenunder, og da Bouchy var faldet i søvn, læste han aviserne hele tiden med hovedet fuld af sorg. I Familo tog stadigvæk ikke telefonen. Han gik op i soveværelset. Cosi var i gang med at gøre orden i sit skab. En bunke sko lå med hælene opad på gulvet. Han stod i døren og sagde stille: Jeg er ikke lykkelig, Cosi. Jeg er forelsket i en anden. Jeg vil skilles. Jeg skal nok sikre, at du og Bouchy ikke mangler noget. Hvad? Hun vendte sig fra spejlet og kiggede tomt på ham. Jeg er ikke lykkelig. Det var ikke sådan, han havde planlagt at sige det. Jeg er forelsket i en anden. Jeg skal nok sikre... Hun løftede hånden og vendte håndfladen mod ham for at få ham til at tie stille. Sig ikke mere, sagde hendes hånd. Sig ikke mere. Det gik op for ham, at hun ikke ville vide mere. Hendes håndflade var bleg, næsten gennemsigtig, og han kunne se det grønne virvar af vener. Hun sænkede hånden. Så sank hun langsomt ned på knæ. Det var let for hende at komme ned på knæ, for det gjorde hun ofte, når hun bad i tv-rummet ovenpå, sammen med hushjælpen og barnepigen, og hvem der ellers måtte være. Bouchy, shh, sagde hun ind imellem bønnernes ord, mens Bouchy fortsatte med sin barnesnak. Men ved slutningen pippede hun altid med sin høje stemme. Ammen. Når Bouchy sagde ammen, Med den glæde, den begejstring, frygtede Ubinse, at hun ville vokse op og blive en kvinde, som med det ord, amen, ville feje de spørgsmål bort, som hun ellers ville have stillet verden. Nu sank Kosi på knæ for ham, og han nægtede at forstå, hvad hun lavede. Ubinse, det her er en familie, sagde Kosi. Vi har et barn. Hun har brug for dig. Jeg har brug for dig. Vi bliver nødt til at holde sammen på den her familie. Hun knælede og tikkede ham om ikke at gå. Og han ville ønske, at hun i stedet for havde været rasende. Kosi, jeg elsker en anden kvinde. Jeg er forfærdelig ked af at såre dig sådan, og det handler ikke om en anden kvinde, Ubinse, sagde Kosi, og kom op og stå med en stemme, der var ved at blive hård, og øjne, der var ved at blive kolde. Det handler om at holde sammen på den her familie. Du har aflagt et løfte foran Gud. Jeg har aflagt et løfte foran Gud. Jeg er en god hustru. Vi har et ægteskab. Tror du bare, du kan ødelægge den her familie, fordi din gamle kæreste er kommet til byen? Ved du, hvad det betyder at være en ansvarlig far? Du har et ansvar over for barnet nedenunder. Det du gør i dag kan ødelægge hendes liv. Og det bare fordi din gamle kæreste kommer tilbage fra Amerika. Bare fordi du har fået noget akrobatisk sex, der minder dig om dine universitetsdage. Ubinse tog et par skridt tilbage. Hun kendte altså til det. Han vendte om, gik ind på sit kontor og låste døren. Han foragtede Kosi for at have vidst det hele tiden, og ladet som om hun ikke vidste det. Og for den ydmygelsens slam, det efterlod i hans mave. Han havde haft sin hemmelighed, og det havde ikke engang været en hemmelighed. Flere lag af skyld tyngede ham. Ikke kun skyld over at ville forlade Kosi, men over overhovedet at have giftet sig med hende. Han kunne jo ikke først gifte sig med hende, velvidende, at det skulle han ikke have gjort. Og nu, hvor de havde et barn, havde lyst til at forlade hende. Hun var fast besluttet på at forblive gift. Og det var også det mindste, han kunne gøre. Han skyldte hende at forblive gift. Panikken skød gennem ham ved tanken om at blive ved med at være gift. Uden Efemilo virkede fremtiden som endeløs, glædesløs monotoni. Han sagde til sig selv, at nu var han dum og dramatisk. At han blev nødt til at tænke på sin datter. Alligevel følte han, at han allerede var på flugt, da han satte sig i sin stol og vendte sig om efter en bog i reolen.
You have to tell me why you choose that.
Well, out of many reasons, because this is a novel about race and hair and love. And I think that of all the things that appealed to me for several reasons, this was, this is where love and obligation meet, and isn't that an eternal problem with any love? That or boredom and curiosity and the way you handle things. And I think it's a brave scene, because you say that it's important to talk about things that are difficult to talk about, and race is of course difficult to talk about, but it's an issue that you will be able to discuss sort of. But this is very difficult because it's pure emotion and a lot of moral on top of it. So why did you write it, I might ask?
I don't know. Just to go back.
You see, it's even more difficult to talk about than race.
No, I think the sort of thinking about the why is quite difficult because I'm not even sure I know the why. I'm not sure I know the whys of much of my fiction writing. But, you know, what we said earlier about many, particularly Nigerian, actually not just Nigerian, but also my African readers, and African American, who have labeled Ifemelu such things as husband snatcher, destroyer of a marriage. I think maybe I wrote that scene because first it rings true, and it's very loosely based. I remember a story about a man who wanted to leave his wife in Lagos, and she knew he was seeing somebody else and had been seeing somebody else for a long time. And the usual thing is to pretend that it's not happening, as long as the marriage remains a marriage of sorts. But this man was a little unusual, as is Obinze in the novel, because this is not the norm. The norm for a Nigerian man is not to say, I want to leave because I'm in love. The norm is to have the wife and then have...
the mistress.
Yes. And I remember the story of this woman getting down on her knees as a response to the man wanting to leave her. And it stayed with me for a long time because it made me sad. And as is the case with gender for me all the time, I like to switch things. So I thought the reverse would never happen. That a woman says to a man in Nigeria, I want to leave you, and the man, you know, he might get violent or he might say, well, get out. And the idea that reasonable response, instead of anger, hurt, or other complex things, is to beg. In that, and not even to beg with dignity, to beg with that kind of absolute humiliation. And I wanted to write that, but Kosi is actually not a character that I'm very sympathetic to, so it was also quite interesting. I mean, sympathetic to the position she occupies in the world, but to the character itself, I find her quite annoying. She's the kind of woman who is very interested in performing gender. So it's not really about what she thinks. She says what she thinks she should say. She pretends to be deeply upset when Obinze's mother won't ask her to clean up because she says, I'm here to help, and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And, you know, inside her, she might actually be quite irritated about helping, but she won't show it because she has to be the good wife. And, yeah, I wanted to write about that idea of never holding men responsible, which is that this happens in this marriage, but many of my female readers think Ifemelu snatched a husband, as though somehow the husband is this inanimate subject that you can pick up when you want to, as though he, but I think in a larger sense, and one of the things I'm interested in gender is not just male-female, but also female-female. It's sort of the way that women are very quick to be, to judge other women, very quick to condemn other women. So Ifemelu is seen, Obinze is immediately innocent. Ifemelu is the problem. And I find that very interesting because, I think that if it's a question of being a problem, both are problems. I mean, both,
I thought, why would he marry her in the first place? And my own answer was that she's very pretty.
She is very pretty, but also he cares about her, and she's a good wife, and he's at a point in his life where he felt very uncertain about things. He'd suddenly become very wealthy, and just wasn't sure. He felt unsteady.
I like the way you defend Obinze. Look at you. You just said you didn't really like the wife, but Obinze, he has all the reasons in the world to marry her.
All right, you're right.
Yeah.
A friend of mine said it's so annoying how blind you are, but she said to me, Obinze is the only character you're just blinded by.
Yeah,
and until
really,
she said that,
I think you are in love with Obinze.
I think that is a fair comment.
Yeah. But he is also, he's a very sweet man.
He's a romanticized version of what I think all men should be.
Yeah. So that's kind of a clue. Now all the male listeners will read your book and just like a recipe.
he's kind and he's thoughtful and he's intelligent and he listens. I mean,
but I must say, if I may say so, actually, most of the men that Ifemelo deal with are kind and intelligent and
that's true.
helpful and cook for her and take her to Paris and
yes. I think it's also, I mean, for me, what's interesting, I think that there are female readers who have disliked Ifemelo because of that.
Really?
Yeah, they've said, why isn't she grateful? She has all of these good men, and she doesn't really deserve them. And but it's true, the men are good men. I mean, I think the world is full of good men. But I also wanted this book to be a certain kind of love story, the sort of traditional, ridiculously romantic love story, which is why she leaves these ostensibly good men, because there's the idea of the great love. And I don't know how true this is, but I like the idea of it.
You like a happy ending?
I actually usually don't. I was very worried that I wouldn't be able to do the happy ending, because it's hard for me. I'm a little suspicious of a certain kind of excessive happiness. Yeah. And with the novel, because, and I like to say that this novel was written in the grand tradition of the romance novels I read when I was a teenager. But hopefully that this is a much better version of them.
What were they? Can you mention one?
Yeah, there's a series of, it was called The Mills and Boon. Aha! I think every teenage girl in Nigeria and boy read Mills and Boon novels. And there were, I mean, I could actually write one in a week, because it's very formulaic, and much of it was, and of course, as most romance books at the time, were very male, so it was they would hate each other when they first meet, and then the man would be forceful, maybe he would pull her to him, and then she would melt next to that sort of thing.
That sounds great.
Well, I mean, and the assumption somehow in those books was there was no female agency. It was sort of, you waited until the man, the woman didn't act. And
so actually you're striking back with Ifemelo, because she doesn't wait.
Yeah, female agency is very important to me, yes. Yes. So, but at the same time I wanted to write, there's I think love is very important. I think love is the most important human emotion. And I wanted to celebrate love in this book, and different kinds of love. So Ifemelo adores her cousin. And there's something, and that love was very much based on my own adoration of my nephew, who I just deeply adore that child. He's 21, and he can do no wrong in my eyes. And I think it's vaguely dangerous to love somebody too much. But I wanted to celebrate that love, but also the romantic love, which is why when I was getting to the end of it, and I never quite know how my books will end, I started to worry that I might not be able to pull off the romantic ending, because there's a part of me that just is drawn to the dark. So I thought maybe somebody will die, right? And
you had me worried, actually. Yes.
But in the end, I was like, it's a triumph for love, and I quite like the ending. Many of my serious literary friends don't like the ending.
Really?
Yeah, which is a good sign, I think.
Yes. It's funny, because when we talked about before that there's so much literature within the literature, and writing is so important, when Obinze comes to actually beg Ifemelo to take him on, he has written the whole explanation down. Is it easier to write things than to say them?
For me, yes. Well, maybe not easier, but I think writing can... Yeah, so sometimes if I have friends who are going through difficult, deeply emotional uncertainties, I say to them, write. I think it can be helpful. I mean, it sounds a bit cliched, but yeah. But in Obinze's case, of course, again, it was part of this book being a celebration of words, the reading of words, the writing of them, because she and Obinze also have when they reconnect, it's a relationship that's also based on words, because they're writing to each other and they haven't spoken. And they write about what's happened to them in the times that they haven't been in touch, and I think that even the writing itself becomes a kind of a ritual of some sort of symbol of reconnection or something. And,
even now here in the extract we heard, when he's most desperate, he turns around and takes out a book.
yeah.
So there is this notion of a kind of salvation within the written and read word.
Yeah, yes, I think that's I like that reading. I'm going to say that the next time I do an interview.
You're a sentence snatcher.
I am.
Good for you. We're going to end this conversation by having you read a small part from the book, because you should always have the last word. But I was just wondering, while we find the place, if this love for Obinze is not just the character he is, but somehow I felt while I was reading it that he was also a reminder of half of a yellow sun. Somehow he takes half of the yellow sun. There's a connection between those two books. I don't know if this is completely spooky thinking, but I felt that he was like a character who could have been there too. Something that a ghost from.
That's actually very interesting. Yeah. No, I mean, of course, it wasn't conscious, but I think that's. Maybe I'll say that again. I'll say that in my next interview.
I think that what
I say the same things over and over, then I get so bored with myself, so I have to think about something else to say. So I'll just steal your sentences.
You prick up your curiosity. I was so afraid you were going to be too bored tonight.
No, not with you, Synne, not with you. Not with you.
So we will end this conversation. I will say thank you to Ellen for reading for us. Thank you. Can you find it? Because I think I took it with my taxi receipt here. This is it. You can. We thought we might have this problem.
Okay. Alexa, flushed with red wine, her eyes red below her scarlet hair, changed the subject. Blunkett must be sensible and make sure this country remains a refuge. People who have survived frightful wars must absolutely be allowed in. She turned to Obinze. Don't you agree? Yes, he said, and he felt alienation run through him like a shiver. Alexa and the other guests, and perhaps even Georgina, all understood the fleeing from war, from the kind of poverty that crushed human souls. But they would not understand the need to escape from the oppressive lethargy of choicelessness. They would not understand why people like him, who were raised well-fed and watered, but mired in dissatisfaction, conditioned from birth to look towards somewhere else, and eternally convinced that real lives happened in that somewhere else. They were now resolved to do dangerous things, illegal things, so as to leave. None of them starving or raped or from burned villages, but merely hungry for choice and certainty. Thank you.